Well, many times when we pray, we forget these next two steps, but they are vitally important to our walk with God. And forgive us our debts. We need to regularly ask God to search our hearts, reveal our sin to us. We need to regularly be confessing those sins to God, asking Him to forgive us. Prayer is about cultivating a relationship with Jesus. And in any relationship, a part of intimacy is humility and openness, humble, open, teachable hearts. Apologize when they are wrong. The mark of a truly humble heart is a genuine desire to apologize for wrongdoing, seek forgiveness. Do not leave any sin unconfessed, unrepented. Sin erodes relationship with God and hinders intimacy with Jesus. Take some time to confess, asking for forgiveness every day. As we also have forgiven our debtors, you may not think that we regularly need to forgive others, but this doesn't just refer to obvious conflicts. This can mean forgiving someone for disappointing you, letting you down, as well as forgiving someone who has wronged you. The way we poorly treat others should show us how badly we need the help of the Holy Spirit to continually offer forgiveness to others. When someone is attempting to have you join in their cruelty against another, don't join them. That's not of the Lord, no matter who they are. We should offer forgiveness freely, whether it is deserved or requested, because we have been forgiven when we did not deserve it. It is our duty as Christians to portray the love of Christ to the world. This means forgiving when the world would say retribution is justified. This means forgiving those who slander you, speak against you, and that's not easy. Our flesh will fight against this tooth and nail, so we need to regularly pray for the strength to forgive others. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Though God allows us to be tempted and tested, He is never the tempter. We lead ourselves into situations where we are tempted. Here Jesus is showing us how to pray against this and keep from being our own worst enemy. This part of prayer is important because our flesh is weak against temptation. Though we can withstand and overcome through the strength of God, it is better if we steer clear of temptation from the beginning. We should also pray that we do not cause temptation for any other brother or sister in Christ. Pray also here for protection and safety, as we have a real enemy who lives to attack God's people, who tries to use us to attack God's people. Pray as Jesus says, for deliverance from evil. Chuck Smith said that he wished God would tell him ahead of time all the steps in his future. However, God would only tell him one step at a time. He'd have to complete that step, then go back each time for the next step, and so on. Chuck says we would like to know a few things first, if we could, about our prayers. We even think sometimes that we know how God should answer our prayers. Chuck said he grew up with a mom that prayed for him. And even as a kid, Chuck would ask his mom to pray for him. At 5 years old, he once hurt his finger. He ran to his mother to pray for his finger. Chuck's mother prayed. However, his finger still hurt him after the prayer. So he told his mother to pray again. But this time, to pray like she really meant it this time. Chuck said, sometimes God waits to answer our prayers. I'm going to give you examples from the Bible where God waited. And I'd like you to think, what was the benefit in God waiting? Hannah, 1 Samuel, first paragraph, first verse. There was a certain man whose name was Elkanah. He had 2 wives, Hannah and Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had none. Year after year, this man went up from his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh. Whenever the day came for Elkanah to sacrifice, He would give portions of meat to his wife Peninnah, to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah, he gave a double portion because he loved Hannah. And the Lord closed Hannah's womb. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival, Peninnah, kept provoking her in order to irritate her. This went on year after year. Whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival Peninnah provoked her till she cried and would not eat. Her husband Elkanah would say to her, Hannah, why are you crying? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons? I have a problem with this. I don't know. Maybe some of you did too. Why is he talking to Hannah? Hannah's not causing any problem. Hey, Peninnah. Yeah, I just want to talk to you a moment. Why are you irritating and provoking Hannah when she hasn't done anything to you? Peninnah, please. I just want to talk to you. I think Elkanah should be doing this, but he's not, so I'm going to do it. You know, you're making her cry, and she's not doing anything. You're trying to make her not eat because you know she doesn't eat. She gets upset. What's your biggest problem here? I don't get it. So, Peninnah's bothering Hannah over and over again. What is this called? This is called a bully. A bully looks for someone that they can bother. No one's perfect, but for someone who keeps trying, that would be a good person for a bully. And that's what she did, day after day and year after year. And why didn't Hannah say something back? I want to talk to Hannah too. I'm wondering. She kind of reminds me of Moses. They said about Moses that he was the meekest, the most mild man on the planet. I believe it, because his sister, in Hebrew we call her Miriam, and brother, Aaron, told him off. And he didn't say anything about it. He said, we're prophets too. God talks to us too. You're not the only one. And I'm thinking, who are they? Well, God called a meeting. He told Moses, I'd like to talk to your brother and sister. They probably thought he'll tell them. You know, God will set Moses straight. He talks to us too. But that's not what God did. God said, I talk to men through dreams and visions, but I talk to Moses face to face. And then as he was going away, Miriam turned white, leprous white. And who prays for her? Moses. He's on the ground praying for her. Why? Just, it's such a beautiful person. I think that's what Hannah was. I think I know. I'm just guessing, but I'm thinking Peninnah was just out and out jealous of Hannah. She was probably beautiful on the outside, but probably that didn't get her as much as how beautiful she was on the inside. She was trying all those years to get her to be irate, and it didn't work. That's what she was the most jealous of. Just my opinion. Once they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh, Hannah stood up. Eli the priest was sitting on his chair by the doorpost of the Lord's house. In her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. And she made a vow, saying, Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him back to the Lord for all the days of his life. What? I thought she had been praying for a son. She went through years of Peninnah bothering her about having a son, and she's going to turn around and give that son right back to God? Yes, because wouldn't God answer a prayer of someone who for so many years wanted to have this baby and is turning around and giving this baby to the temple? I'm not talking about a day, a week, a month, a year, from some point to the rest of his life. I couldn't do that. That's amazing. This is during a time where she had no children, and that was her plan. I think that's going to work. Let's see. As she kept on praying to the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. Eli thought she was drunk and said to her, "How long are you going to stay drunk? Put away your wine." "Not so, my lord," Hannah replied. "I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I've been drinking no wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I've been praying here out of my great anguish and grief." Eli answered, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him." She said, "May your servant find favor in your eyes." Then she went her way and ate something, and her face was no longer downcast. I think she got it. She had complete faith here. She knew that God had blessed her. Eli, he blessed her. This was too many coincidences. She had a feeling this was going to be honored. And about not eating, I would have been eating till I was as big as the house. I can't believe she didn't eat when she got upset. I would have done the opposite. Early the next morning, they arose and worshiped before the Lord, and then went back to their home at Ramah. The Lord remembered Hannah. So in the course of time, Hannah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel. And what a son. Any of us would have loved to have Samuel. Best judge ever. I bet Penna didn't like that either, probably. When her husband Elkanah went up with all his family to offer the annual sacrifice to the Lord and to fulfill his vow, Hannah did not go. She said to her husband, "After the boy is weaned, I will take him and present him before the Lord, and he will live there always." After he was weaned, she took the boy with her, young as he was, along with a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. When the bull had been sacrificed, they brought the boy to Eli, and she said to him, "Pardon me, my lord, as surely as you live, I am that woman who stood here beside you, praying to the Lord. I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him. So now I give him back to the Lord. For his whole life, he will be given over to the Lord." And he worshiped the Lord there. Imagine that, a 3-year-old worshiping the Lord. Now, other stories from the Bible. Again, think, what was the benefit in God waiting so long? A lame man over 40 years old, Acts chapter 3, verse 2. "And a certain lame man from his mother's womb was carried, whom they laid daily at the gate of the temple, asking for alms. Fixing his eyes on him with John, Peter said, 'Look at us.' So he gave them his attention, expecting to receive something. Peter said, 'In the name of Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk.' And he took him by the right hand, lifted him up, and immediately his feet and ankle bones received strength. So he, leaping up, stood up, walked, and entered the temple with them, walking, leaping, and praising God." You know, this is still a miracle today. You cannot today have any doctor, no matter how smart they think they are, tell someone to walk who has never walked and is over 40. Another thing, it's true that they have a machine that they could put paralyzed person's limbs in, so you could put their legs or feet, and they walk because the machine is walking and they're inside. But when you take those legs out, those paralyzed legs and feet, they don't have the strength a 40-year-old would have. They don't have the support inside of their bones, the muscles, the tissue. Rosalind can tell you more. So good. They don't have that. So this cannot be performed today. They cannot instantly do this with a 40-year-old who's been lame since birth. In fact, at birth, even if you brought someone back to their birth somehow, it was bad then. This is what started the problem. It wouldn't even help to bring him back if there was somehow to do that, some way. So he was lame from birth and now walks perfectly. Unbelievable. That's the God we have. He's the God who made man, created man, and the God that can bring a man or woman back to even better than they were at birth. That's our God. Not Buddha, Mohammed, Confucius, any of them can do that. How about the man born blind? Remember to look at what is good about waiting. 23 years old, Mark chapter 8, verse 22. They came to Bethsaida, and some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. Jesus spit on the man's eyes and asked, "Do you see anything?" He looked up and said, "I see people. They look like trees walking around." Once more, Jesus touched his eyes, and he saw perfectly. Let's do that test again. No doctor, as smart as he thinks he is going to be able to say this with just his words and bring this man back to sight. If somehow, by miracle, they could do things, it still wouldn't be even as good. And if you brought him back to birth, this is the problem he had at birth. Today it's true, there's magnifying lenses. I have lenses dropped in my eye, clear lens removal. They have telescopic lenses. They have things, but not instantaneously, and not without procedures and operations and medicine and time. This was immediate. This was amazing. Now, some people will criticize, Chuck says, why in the lame man's case did God work through Jesus? Jesus worked through Peter. And why did that happen instantaneously? Versus this man born blind versus the man born lame. I hope I said that right. This man, it took two different steps. Does that mean God couldn't have done the same thing here that was done with the man lame? No, of course he could have. Well, what is the reason that in one case it was immediate with the lame man and 2 steps with the blind man? Pastor Michael Clark says something I really agree with, which is he believes God is trying to show us something. You don't need to take one litany, one prayer, and use it for everything. In fact, you're not supposed to. God can heal in any way that he wants to. He can heal over time if he wants to. And so this makes perfect sense. A woman healed of a 12-year-old bleed. Luke chapter 8, verse 43. While Jesus was traveling in a crowd, a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years touched Jesus' cloak. He said, "Your faith has healed you. Go in peace." A lot of talk about this. Even at the time, the apostles were wondering, why did Jesus also say at that time, "Who touched me"? What, wouldn't he know? Wouldn't he know because he's God? Wouldn't he know because there's a great big crowd there bumping into them? Wouldn't he know all this stuff? They're probably very quizzical. What's going on here? Again, my personal opinion, for what it's worth. I think Jesus wanted that woman to give her own testimony out of her own lips, because you know how we like that when someone tells her own story. And so, look at this. She made a beeline for Jesus. It's not like she didn't have some faith. She had faith for 12 years, paying people all her money who couldn't heal her. But she had absolute faith here because she wasn't asking anyone's permission. She wasn't inquiring about anything. She's making this beeline to touch Jesus, a woman to touch a man's clothing. And she did that, I believe, because she had perfect faith. She might have heard Jesus has healed a bunch of people. She might have been there when he did it. There was something that made her know this time, this is all I have to do. And that's what she did. Both Chuck and Pastor Michael Clark say we sometimes relegate prayer to the last thing we do. And in her case, a little of that. But right now, on that day, it was Jesus first. It was, this is the answer. Just amazing. And even Jesus says, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. How about the story of Abraham? Abraham was probably the oldest this happened to. Waited till he was 100 years old, his wife 90, for God's promised blessing to have his son through Sarah. Chuck said that God said, my ways are not your ways. Chuck said, maybe God wished to give us a classic example of waiting on God. Sometimes God delays answers to prayers because God is desiring to do more than just answer that one prayer. So in those days, they probably had some idea, not a perfect idea, about this window of opportunity, when someone can have a kid and when they're too old to have a kid. And here, Sarah, probably past her menses, yeah? 90? I think so. Even they would know in that time that this was miraculous. That's a classic for us. Because even today, pretty much the same thing. It's not that they can't have operations and procedures, but not by God predicting and giving a time when this would happen. And God did do that this season, next year. And it was true. And the man who waited longer than everyone, can you guess, was Lazarus. Lazarus had to wait till he died and came back. That's a long time. I don't know if we can all wait for that, right? Or if it would happen. Lazarus had two sisters, Mary and Martha. They write a letter to Jesus saying, hurry, the one you love is very sick. Jesus looks at this and he purposely waits. He knows it takes 2 days. It was a 2-day journey from where he was. He waits until Lazarus would be dead to come over there. And that's what he did. He waited over 4 days. And then even when Mary and Martha saw him, they told him, if you would have been here while he was alive, he wouldn't have died. That's true. But that was the whole plan, for him to die. Because even the people of that time, not knowledgeable as we are now, would know that you can't bring someone back from the dead unless you're Jesus, right? They would know that's a miracle. Even in their day, they'd figure that out. So some people, Chuck says that he would have healed him while he was alive. Some people would say Jesus healed Lazarus. But some would say, you just give him enough time, he would have gotten better. Look, he didn't die yet, and he's gotten better on his own. He didn't need Jesus. Well, Jesus made sure that that rumor wouldn't go around, and waiting for him to be dead first. And now a story from a friend of mine. I followed Pastor Michael Clark over 28 years, and many years ago I was in Tehachapi, so was another woman. And she told me this prayer. It was so sensational what God did in answering this prayer that I called her up just a little while ago. And I said, tell me that prayer again. I want to make sure I say it right. And she told me. And here's what she said. She said, I was a Catholic and married in the Catholic Church. I was devastated when my kid's dad had many girlfriends over the 19-year marriage. He said, I'll take care of the kids, but I'm not going to feed you. And that finally got her attention. And she finished the paperwork for that divorce. She left her entire family, taking 2 of her 3 kids with her, moved, got a job, started attending a Calvary chapel. She says, I was curious as to why there was no spark with any other men until I met my husband-to-be, serving kids at the Calvary Chapel. I asked my friend what she did during those 19 years of that terrible marriage, and then 10 more years of waiting for this husband-to-be. She says, I was responsible for making sure that the kids' homework was done, that they had their supplies. laundry, cooking, packing lunches, working 12-hour shifts. 4 years, night shift, driving kids to the school and back during the day. 6 years, day shift, 5:15 a.m. to 6:45 p.m. Then cleaning, shopping, being mom. No time to think, just time to cling to Jesus. I started the LVN program, and I was licensed in 2008. She says, as I looked back, I could see Jesus' hand in the time and the promise to trust him. Both my husband-to-be and I met after we were both available because he was still married for 10 more years after her divorce. Trust in the one, she says, who holds time and hearts in his heart and hands. And she said, tell you ladies that by sharing your journeys with each other, you are sharing your weaknesses. And now lastly, 2 very short stories from Pastor Chuck about when someone wants something. True story. A man, he doesn't say if he's Christian or not, was a New York insurance broker. He came to California during the gold rush, and he went to Colorado. He found gold right away. He bought the deed to that land. He went back to New York. He told his friends, probably showed them the gold, and they gave him every penny he needed for the equipment to drill for gold and to pay men to do the drilling. He came back to Colorado. They set it up. They drilled. They immediately got gold. Not just gold. Gold enough to pay back everyone who paid for all that equipment and for all these men to do the drilling. And then it stopped. As quick as it was, as fast as it was, it dried up. Well, he couldn't just stop. What if it was just a fluke and it's going to start up again? He used up every penny that he was going to use to pay back his friends, and then he quit. He went to a trash dealer and he sold him everything for a few $100s. The equipment, the deed to the land. And he told the trash dealer everything that happened. And he went back to New York to start his life over. And the trash dealer got a geologist to look at the stratification of the land. Kind of reminds me of ICR. And then that geologist found out something. He saw where the gold was and how much approximately it was. And then 3 feet away, he saw a whole bunch more gold, even more than the gold that the first man found. And so he came back and explained that to the trash dealer. The trash dealer got men to work on the drilling, and the geologist showed him where that 3 feet was, which direction. They found gold immediately, and just as he said, much more gold than the first amount. And at that time in Colorado, that trash dealer became the richest man in Colorado. And Chuck said about all this, he wonders, have we been just 3 feet away? Change that vernacular. Have we been 3 minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years? Have we been close to an answer in our prayers and just gave up? I know I am. Chuck believes he has. I think that's true. Last story. Okay, this story, all of you have heard it, or you've heard the first couple of steps. Maybe some of you heard the ending part. But Chuck says, there was a bottle that came from the ocean onto this beach. And a man came by it, and he uncorked that bottle. And some of you will know the next words. And voila, a genie comes out. And he says, your wish is my command. And the man who found it said, I've always been afraid to travel by airplane. And I'm even more afraid to travel on anything on water, ship or boat. But I've always wanted to go to Hawaii. I've seen pictures, I've heard stories. I'd like you to make 2 walls right here on this beach, all the way to Hawaii, and to hold back the water, and I'll drive there myself. The genie looked at him and said, I don't think you'll get this. Do you even know how many square feet of wood it would take for me to make 2 great big walls in the ocean to hold back the ocean on both sides and go all the way from this beach to Hawaii? I don't think you get it. Do you know how many trees I'd have to kill? Come on, be reasonable. Give me a reasonable request and I'll answer it. Just one. And the man said, oh, you're right. I'm so sorry, I've been unreasonable. I do have something. Even if you just help me, but this is all I need. Can you just help me to understand my wife? The genie said, did you want 2 or 4 lanes on the highway? There are 3 things I'd like you to do when you're at your table. The first thing, maybe someone could write this down at each table, is I'd like you to give a prayer. It could be yours or someone you heard of, and that prayer that took a long time to be answered. But now you have an idea, and I'd like everyone at the table to chip in ideas. Why was it a benefit that God had that take so much time? Number 2, I'd like you to come up with a prayer even of your own or somebody else's that still isn't answered, that's taking so much time. But I'd like you and that whole table to chip in with ideas. And the ideas being, can you do what Hannah did? Can you make a spin on this prayer and get it to be under God's perfect will? And what would you need to do that God would love to answer that prayer? And number 3, I just want to thank you for letting me talk.